Are you creative?
No, why would I need to be creative? I'm a clinician.
If you don't think you need to be, think again.
Today, we focus on creativity. My name is Mike.
And it's Ewan.
Welcome to the Imperfect Clinician. Today, we wanted to talk about creativity. It is quite a big one, I think. And are we all creative?
What I've found in the healthcare world is when I ask people, do you see yourself as a creative? Oh, no. I can't do any of the artistic stuff. So, no, I'm not a creative. When I ask students, are you creative? Oh, no, I don't need to be. I just want to be more clinical.
Okay, so there is a perception of creativity that leads us to a conclusion that creative person needs to be able to make something out of nothing. So let's go into the definition. What is creativity for you?
I think creativity for me is thinking outside the box. When you say creating something out of nothing, I see that quite regularly as a problem solving skill. If it's something that's new, you have to think of different ways of dealing with it. If the usual, inverted commas, usual way of dealing with the problem doesn't work. So I see that as a creativity, or when you have to look at the problem and solve it creatively.
Okay, solve creatively. So creativity, you first mentioned about when you ask people whether they are creative, they make this connotation with art or being able to, I don't know, have some manual skills or, I don't know, music or whatever. But now we're talking about the skill solving. Where is the relation? Is there a common ground, or are they completely two different things?
I think we are creative innately. Looking at a baby, a child, they're constantly drawing on something, colouring, and it's just their way of expressing themselves. And I think being creative is just being a part of you. Maybe with time, that's not being nurtured and nourished because of, I don't know, judgment. Don't want to be seen as this or that, or maybe people commented on that. And so that part of us then are not thriving. I see other artists' family encourage that different perspective view of art, whether that is painting, music, and spur it on and encourage that in children so that it's not reduced. So when you talk about having creativity, I think this is something that all of us innately have. For example, I want to be creative with my cooking, and you just create things out of scratch. I think that is creativity. If you want to, I don't know, plate the food differently, that is a form of creativity. If a child wants to go and bang on the piano and make a tune that's completely out of tune, they're being creative and having fun with it.
Yeah, so it's trialing different concepts, different things that are outside of what they know so far.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you go back, really go back, I mean, talking to ancient Greece, and you look at Plato, for example, never thought that painters were creative because they don't create, they imitate whatever they see in front of them, for example. Okay. So they lacked the definition of creativity in that form. They were more, when it comes to making something, that comes to poetry as such, because poetry comes from poiein, I think, as a Greek term, if I remember correctly, for creation. And that comes later on into poetry and writing things, usually rhymey, but not exclusively. So there are different concepts of creativity and different definitions. I quite like the definition by Robert Sternberg, who says that it's essentially making something original and worthwhile. So it is going outside of the box of the problem that is in front of you, or whether you want to entertain yourself with music, with a problem to solve, potentially at work as well, to either overcome the issue or create something that would be enjoyable, worthwhile in one sense or the other.
Yeah, and I guess you gave me a bit more clarity because when I first heard the term or the sentence or the quote that you've just mentioned, my first question would be, what is the definition of worthwhile? Because it's different for other people. And
And that's the thing, it's very, very individual because this is a very broad subject, and putting it into, one sentence is very, very hard. But making something worthwhile means that you invested the time to appreciate that, or for others to appreciate it.
yeah, and I think hopefully by giving people some perspective of being creative, you have the ability to then reflect on how you are now and go, what do I enjoy being creative in? It doesn't have to be work related, as I said. It can be, I don't know, cooking, decorating,
That's correct.
DIY.
But then when it comes to like etymology of the word as such, there are people, namely, for example, Ignacio Goetz, who argued that because we consider creativity as making something. And he argued that creativity is not necessarily making of things, it's just the process or the act of creating without actually deciding on the end product, on the end result, or on the end purpose. So it's just the act of getting from point A to B without necessarily achieving anything as such.
And I'm hoping that creativity is not limited just by those definitions because I see other people's skills. For example, when Brene Brown looks at her evidence in her research, she can tie lots of seemingly unrelated findings into a relatable and digestible content. So people can then learn from it. I think that's a very creative skill.
That is a very creative skill
Yeah,
indeed.
that's why when you say creating something from nothing, even the ability to take on a material and then adapt it or upgrade it to something that will resonate with more people and reach more people and perhaps help them, I see that as creativity too. Even if it's something like trialing different teas, or it can be seeped into every parts of your life. It doesn't have to be big and it doesn't have to be in others' eyes worthwhile as long as it brings you joy. I think we probably need to learn to embrace our creativity more so than what we're doing now.
I completely agree. And I think that understanding that we all can have a slightly different understanding of creativity is very, very important because we all think, oh, you paint pictures, for example, therefore you are creative. But they don't take into consideration that they, by, I don't know, let's say going back to cooking, that they create flavor, maybe a new combination, whatever they trialing out, making errors, making mistakes. For me, creativity is trying something new without the fear of failure because it opens up to a new possibilities, and you have to be able to, if you're thinking outside of the box, you are bound to potentially make mistakes. And this is a learning process on how to become more creative, more aware of those instincts and your emotional intelligence in that respect. What is the link between intelligence and creativity? Is creativity only, I don't know, a sign together with intelligence?
No. So in creativity is linked with psychological safety. And it's exactly what you've said about not being afraid to make mistake. Because if you're in a workplace and you feel safe, you're able to come up with creative ideas and say, why don't we try doing this? How about if we try doing that? That doesn't work. let's try another different way. And so the psychological safety needs to come from that. So just to give a brief definition, we talked about it in our previous episode. This is when you feel that you are safe to voice your own opinion without a culture of blame and judgment. And the whole of you, your whole authentic self, is being accepted in the group. So you have a sense of belonging and you feel psychologically safe. And in a thriving environment as such, people then feel empowered to take ownership of what's happening. It doesn't have to wait for a problem to happen. It can be, what system do we have now and what can we tweak to make it better? And all of these requires creativity, because any place that you work in, not one place is the same, regardless of where you are. And so you have to go into each individual space, gather intelligence, speak to people, understand the culture before you can come up with ideas that works for everyone, or maybe you need even more engagement in order for the idea to be implemented to see whether it is working.
Okay, so now can you be creative without being original?
Yes.
In my opinion, by all means. I mean, it can go hand in hand when you create some sort of innovation of one sort of another. But I don't think necessarily that if you're, for example, reproducing somebody's picture, or if you're working on the idea, solution of the problem that may not necessarily be ultra original, but when you implement it in a positive manner and in a manner that solves the problem, that doesn't necessarily prove that you have to be original, but you still can be creative.
Yes. And when you implement an idea, I think, as most things, especially in healthcare, I want to say in most things, the devil is in the detail. So, how you implement it and the people that you have, and how you have to adapt it to or communicate it to motivate the people who will be driving the change with you. That is not going to be a one size fit all, because everyone will have different groups of people. Everyone will have different relationships at work. Everyone will have different cultures at work. And so, yes, maybe the brief vision or idea might be similar. However, how you implement it and how you engage and how you go, oh, that didn't really land very well. What other ways can I do it? Those are encountering a problem and looking at it from a creative perspective. And in order for you to be creative, you also need to work in collaboration. And when you work in collaboration, whether it's on a smaller scale or a larger scale, whether you are speaking with different stakeholders, those requires collaboration. And for collaboration to work, it requires creativity.
So collective creativity adds on to the possible number of the solutions?
Yes,
Yeah?
definitely.
Mhm.
Because if you, let's say from a small team perspective, if a team of 10 feels safe, everyone will come up with ideas and they will discuss it and maybe improve it within themselves. But then everyone will come back and say, right, what worked well, what doesn't work well, and what can be better. So, yes, when you have that environment, you will have that creativity and collaboration across, whether it's a small group of people or whether it's a larger scale of system partnership.
Absolutely. And for those who want to find out a bit more about creativity, I would urge you to look closer into Torrance tests of creative thinking, which is a test of creativity or problem solving skills. And it's based on four different scales. Later, it was a bit updated, but the four scales are fluency, so the number of meaningful solutions. Then there is flexibility on the number of different categories of solution to the problem. Then there is originality, so potentially rarity of the solutions as such. And then there is elaboration, so going into details. I mean, later on, it was a bit updated. I think it got rid of the flexibility and included resistance to premature closure. So to make sure that we are persistent in finding the solution. So that was a big piece of research that Alice Torrens have put into the creativity as a model as such. But now, for me, out of all this, deliberation on how we approach the problems and how we go about it, even in a collective, it's all about trying, essentially about dropping those ideas, being in a safe space where we can feel included in adding ideas that could solve the problem that is ahead of us. And also, on the individual level, that includes being individually creative in terms of, for example, picking up a pencil and drawing, making those mistakes. I mean, I am the last person on the planet that should pick up the pen to try to draw anything. I am struggling to draw a straight line with a ruler, but I would still have a go if I need to. I mean, our little girls do encourage or do expect sometimes us to do some things with them. And that allows me to, despite, being fully aware that I'm probably never going to draw anything pretty, but I still do try and do create something on my own terms. How creative are you? What do you do for creation?
I am now able to say, because I was one of those that goes, I'm not creative. And now looking back, I am. I've always been. I just wasn't embracing that part of myself. So I restarted sketching and painting again during COVID and restarted playing the piano again during those time. And when I was retracing my steps into why I stopped, one of the reasons for stopping any artistic endeavors was because of the culture of art where I was growing up. You have to draw what you've been told to, and it has to be done according to what's been said.
So that's the imitation we were talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I didn't like it. I wanted to do my own thing. And so because it wasn't up to standard, it wasn't encouraged, or it was judged poorly, to the point, instead of just poorly on my skill, you're not a good listener, you're not a good student, and judging my character directly. And so I just stopped. But when I started doing it just for the sake of doing it, and like you said, worthwhile for me, I found that it is an endeavor that allow me to just be. I don't have to live up to certain standards, not even my own. And when I'm trying to work on not being a perfectionist, I will force myself to do one stroke for the whole picture. Sometimes when I want things to be right, I tend to erase it and repeat it again and erase and repeat it again. And one stroke for the whole picture forces me to accept whatever that is being put on the paper and accepting the imperfection. And I think when I started embracing the creative part of myself, I then started to realize I was able to look at problems and try to see them from a different perspective. And I was able to come up with more creative solutions, or even creative pilots where things are not being done ever before. And I thought, why don't I try this? And I discussed with people and we try, and it worked. Sometimes it doesn't, but then it's still worth a try. So I think especially in the world where most things are glamorized, is that a word?
Now it is.
When everything is being put on to be, so beautiful, or, and it's a completed piece of work, learning to accept that, oh, I'm not very happy with that, but that allowed me to switch my brain off for 20 minutes, an hour. And I'm grateful for that. And so when I always come back to it, it then brings me more joy. And now I see it as one of my toolkit for me to relax.
Okay, a few things. What I've noticed of what you were saying.
Mm.
So you mentioned that the culture you grew up with essentially promoted copying of the right either behaviors, solutions to the problems, drawing things perfectly, playing music
According to what the teacher said.
what the teacher says. Okay. So now the creative solution to satisfying your own personal needs would have come out of certain level of rebellion.
Yes.
So this was the standing in opposition to what you realize as a norm. So now, can we say that being creative is being against?
Maybe. Because what is the norm anyway?
That's the thing. The definition is very, very individual.
And if you look at replicating that environment in a workplace where you say to somebody, no, you have to do exactly what I tell you to, you are removing and disempowering people because they'll go, oh, what's the point of me having my own opinion? You're not going to listen anyway. And so people lose interest, people lose motivation, and the creativity, essentially, the leader is stepping it out and removing it, essentially, even though it's such a great asset to the team. But this might come from the need for control, the need to be right.
The need to be liked, the need to be conforming to, I don't know, organizations or to the patterns of thinking that are preferred rather than encourage those thinking outside of the box.
And the need for ego.
Yeah, and the need for personal gratification or feeding your personal ego as such.
Yes.
So now, is it hard to be creative? Does it have to be hard to be creative?
I don't think so. It can be as simple as looking at the clouds and think, oh, what shape do I see? And you will see a different shape than anybody else. Looking at the leaves and say, is that a sheep?
Yeah, but there is a difference between seeing things in a slightly different way and expressing it, for example, in a team when you're sitting there is a problem, okay?
Yes, but you don't have to start big. Start by baby steps. I'm not asking you to run a marathon straight away.
No, I agree.
Start small where you go, actually, which part of my day am I being creative? And calling it being creative because we are all creative creatures. And which part of it do I enjoy? And I think when you do that, it becomes a nourishing activity. And when you do more of nourishing activities, you realize different parts of you start to bloom. And you might make one link from cooking to another. Who knows? This is a great opportunity for people to reflect both personally and at work, whether you are a manager or a leader or not. Start from work and go, how do I feel? Are my thoughts, opinions being listened to? Am I a creative problem solver? Or am I creative at work?
But is being creative finding the solution that's going to fix it or finding a number of solutions that might be tested?
The latter.
Well, I think it could be both.
It can be both. But when you do more of the second one, you will get to the first one anyway.
Well, that is very true, but they both can be done in a creative manner.
Yes,
It just
but I
realizing it that sets the
chose
difference for me.
Yes, but I chose the second one because the second one encourages trying, not encouraging purely results. And so when you encourage people to try and to voice opinion and to support them with that, you will get to point number one, because I feel point number one is more of a short-term goal. Point number two is a long-term goal.
So, in that respect, if you are saying about yourself that I'm not creative, it may equal that I'm not willing to try, to fail,
Or I am scared to, yes.
or I'm scared to fail. Yeah, whatever the the feelings about
Or
it is.
maybe they don't see that as being creative. I've spoken to some of the students previously, and they go, after a brief conversation, they go, actually, if that's the case, I will see myself as a creative at work, because I've never seen it that way. I've always seen it as a more, like we said, artist creating a musical piece, but never from a context of any place that we are working in, regardless of your profession, regardless of your job title, regardless of what you do.
So, how do you become creative in organizations that are quite structured and operate within quite tight restrictions? For example, I mean, how creative can you be when you are a clinician and you have got all the guidelines on the planet to follow, or the pathways, or everything else? Where's the creativity there?
So, clinicians or not, we are all leaders. Whether that comes with the title of a manager or even other titles, you will always be involved in system working. That might mean speaking to reception, speaking to the patient, dealing with bloods, dealing with results. There is always a system wherever you are working. Yes, it might be clinically, it's relatively straightforward, but how can you improve the system that you are based in? Whether that's in community, whether that's in the practice, whether that's in the hospital, or whether that's in the prison, whether that's in the industry. Any of these, or even wider than that, it requires you to look at what systems are in place and what you can do to improve it. And a lot of the time, people are part of the system. And in order to deal with people, you have to be creative, you have to be engaging, and you have to work together to make things better.
So, essentially, when you make more systemic changes, you make things that are worthwhile. Our clinical work towards, meeting patients' expectations, you make it more worthwhile because you make it either more efficient, or you make more systemic changes, or you make more difference for a greater amount of people, or you
Yeah,
delivering it in a, I don't know, safer environment, for example.
and it doesn't have to be a big system.
Oh, I agree. It could be anything like, making notes on patient records in a certain way that is more, I don't know, readable, understandable, and more universal.
Yeah, and you are working a lot of times not in isolation. You're working with a team, whether it's a team of 3, 5, 20, you will need creativity for teamwork. You will need collaboration for teamwork. And this is where it comes in.
Okay, so this is our take on creativity. I'm sure there is a lot more to talk about. So if you feel like you would like to share your ways of being creative and what is maybe stopping you from thinking that you are creative, because we all believe that we all are and we all have to be. And to some extent, we have no choice but to be creative in our lives. We hope that you have a little think, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you very much. Bye bye. It's about time for you and Reads.
Simon Sinek, first book, Start With Why. I think he burst into the ether with his inspirational talks and ideas about Start With Why. He argues that the most successful leaders and organizations are the one who can articulate their why, and by doing so, able to inspire others. It really helped me in my reflection throughout my journey, both as a person, as a mother, and as a leader, on the why and the purpose of my life. And sometimes when that gets quite murky because something else takes priority, or maybe the external validation gets too loud, I go back to this book to help me gain more clarity.
Thank you for listening to the Imperfect Clinician Podcast.
grow, and learn with us using our experience and flaws, just like we'd learn every day about ourselves. The best way to support us is to hit that follow or subscribe button. Thanks for your participation in our socials. We take to heart the ratings, reviews, and comments.
The best way we can repay you is by making this podcast better and by reaching and inspiring more people like you, like us. Until next time.
No, 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 no.
Okay?
Fine.